I'm Amy Sarek King, and I am a suicide loss survivor. I lost my daughter Gracie back in 2018, and long before then I've been a proponent for talking about mental health openly in our communities, especially with our young people. My job as an author and as a public speaker brings me into schools to talk to young people about all kinds of things, usually surviving trauma, surviving life, and surviving this world. But my main focus is really to talk to young people about their emotions, which is what Gracie, my daughter, really wanted to do. She wanted to talk to very young people about their mental health because it's incredibly important to us as a family. She struggled a long time, and we were a good family. We were good, we were solid. And there's no answer to many questions that come when you lose someone to suicide. Gracie was 16 when she died. We had been aware of her psychological struggles, and she was in therapy and on medication, and we were really minding her quite well since she was about 13 or 14. She had one inpatient stay, which was right before she passed away. Like many other families, while the therapy, like the therapist, first-hand therapist, was not difficult to find, the other services that were required were sometimes very difficult to access. Psychiatric care, pharmaceutical needs, that was very difficult to access. And in fact, we were on a waiting list, and I got a call back 3 months after Gracie passed away to say that she'd finally gotten to her place in line. As a parent, the best I could do was help as much as I could. We listened, I read a lot of self-help books. As the suicidal ideations really became bigger, at first Gracie would talk about it. We had ways to talk about it. She was shy about it. She was embarrassed. I think a lot of people with mental illness are embarrassed, and I think that's the culture. Our society has we're still doubling down on it now, which is unbelievable when you think about it. To go to my wider work, when I work in the community, you're looking at the number one disease killing those aged 10 to 34 is mental illness. So when we are shocked by suicide, it shows that we are not aware of what's really going on in the world.
We've got our love to pay the bills. And maybe I think you're cute and funny. Maybe I wanna do what bunnies do with you, if you know what I mean. Oh, let's get rich and buy our parents' homes in the south of France. Let's get rich and give everybody nice sweaters and teach them how to dance. Let's get rich and build a house on a mountain, making everybody look like ants. And way out there, you and I.
The number one disease killing those aged 10 to 34 is mental illness. So when we are shocked by suicide, it shows that we are not aware of what's really going on in the world, right? Suicide is shocking, it's sad, it's so many things, but one of the things it's not is discussed. We don't talk about it very much, and because we don't talk about it, then we judge, and we have a lot of weird ideas about it. But if you understood the number one disease, I said this to someone recently, I said the number one disease killing those 10 to 24, because I work in schools, so I use that one specifically, is mental illness. They said, well, what about cancer? So I looked at them and I said, the number one disease killing those aged 10 to 24 is mental illness. If we took it a little more seriously as a culture, and as hard as a parent, I talk to parents a lot, and I explain, adults even, like teachers as well, and we're so prone to blowing teenagers off. We are so prone to it. In fact, we're encouraged to bully teenagers in our culture. We bully what they like. We make fun of what the music they like. We make fun of the books they like. We make fun of all kinds of things. We don't make fun. We roll our eyes. We minimize it, right? And so that carries over into minimizing them, and therefore minimizing their problems, right? And then we have the interesting the mix in. We have the interesting mix of the culture again. So now, teen girls, how are we taught to believe them or blow them off? Are we taught to listen to them or not? Are they always overreacting and being dramatic? What about teen boys? Should they be quiet because that's what the strong silent type is? What messages are we giving our young people? What messages are we modeling for them, right? When I go into schools and communities, I talk to young people the way I talk to anybody. A lot. And I talk openly about my feelings. And I talk openly about how emotions are real. I ask young people, what are you angry about? And what I've learned is that it is very difficult to get a bunch of teenagers to tell you what they're angry about, because they don't think you really care about what they're angry about. And they also say, I can't tell you that. I'm like, well, why not? And they say, well, you're not gonna, basically they're saying you're not gonna validate it. And that is one of the biggest things we need to do for young people, is validate their emotions, right? Because when you're functioning in a healthy way, you're already denied that as a young person in this culture. But if you're dealing with mental illness, the embarrassment, the stress of it, that's every day, it wears on you. And if you don't have someone to validate that stress, well, you're all alone. I tried my best to make sure that Gracie didn't feel alone, and that she knew I was there to talk to her. Her dad did the same. We were pretty tight as a family that way. I think one of the funny myths about suicide is suicide is selfish. In actual fact, I understand where that comes from. I am a survivor of losing my daughter, and that is some difficult stuff. I understand that. But really, for somebody who's suffering, I think, with suicidal ideation, it's the opposite. I feel like a burden. And as adults, it's our job to make sure our children don't feel like a burden. I think that the burden feeling isn't anybody's fault. I think that comes with the illness. There is a myth that suicide is preventable. And we all want to stop suicide. Of course we do. But suicide is as preventable as cancer is. You get a sign, you get a diagnosis, then from there, we can hope that the treatments work, right? And that is where, it's a struggle. I think one of the interesting parts about having mental illness in the family, that's another thing we don't talk about. So what an incredible, trap to fall into when you deal with the fact as well that 1 in 4 people are struggling with young people. Okay, so 1 in 4 young people struggling with mental illness, and 70% of teen mental illness goes undiagnosed and untreated. That is pretty not good. The number one thing I would say to adults, teachers, parents would be to listen to young people. Listen to them. Trust them. And if you're really worried, use the resources that are there. I didn't like calling crisis intervention. I didn't like calling crisis intervention one bit. I didn't like going to the ER. I didn't like that. But I did it because it was that night where my daughter looked at me and trusted me enough to say, I need to go to the ER now. And I said, okay. And the first time I didn't know Gracie was showing signs of mental illness. I thought she was showing signs of the same stuff I did when I was 13. And she did something that was, frustrating to a mom. And I got frustrated. And that's normal. And then afterwards she said, oh, and then she really started saying things that made me worry. Like that she now felt, when I did frustrating things as a kid, I felt dumb, apologetic, a bunch of other things. She felt suicidal. And that made me go, wait, what? Are you serious? And then have that serious conversation with her and then go from there. I was in a group for a while for moms, specifically, who lost kids to suicide. And after only a little while, the majority of the moms coming in were losing 10 and 11-year-olds. And that shook me. It does amazing things to a human, right? All of this does amazing things to a human, but First of all, I felt grateful to have had 16 years with Gracie. Second of all, my heart just broke. I mean, how do you reconcile that? And yet people are reconciling that. People in your community are reconciling with that all the time. Why? Because everybody wants to answer why, and nobody can answer why. I can't even answer why, and I've got some serious intel, right? I've got good information. I can't tell you why. And Gracie's not the only person that I'm close to who I've lost to suicide. I can't tell you why about the others either. But if I was to offer any advice to young people who might be feeling the struggle, feeling it hard, I want you to know, and this came out of something I wrote to Gracie after she passed away, I want you to know that you are worth a million oceans. And I really want you to hear me say that. You are not a burden. You are not a burden. Even if you feel like a burden. That's part of the thing that's not telling you the truth. And the truth is you have every reason to be on the earth, and you belong here. I just can't stress enough how much you need to be